all, hi everybody. I just want to thank you guys all so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to attend the last session of the day. And today I will be talking about the different market changes and trends that we have observed since the release of iOS 14.5 and the impact that that has had on our performance marketing. So just a quick brief self-intro. For those of you, probably, if not all of you, that don't know me, my name is Angela, and I'm currently working out as a product specialist at Moloko out of our Redwood City office. Moloko is a 100% programmatic RTB DSP with 6 global offices spread across the US, EMEA, and APAC. Before working as a product specialist, I was also an account manager working out of our Korea and Singapore offices. And prior to Moloko, I worked at different startups as a performance marketing manager for various mobile apps. One fun fact or favorite activity that I like to do is traveling. And I've been to about 15 countries so far and cannot wait to add more onto my list when the pandemic is over. All right, so with iOS 14.5, this has been a very hot topic in the performance marketing and ad tech industry. There's been a lot of anticipation for the release of iOS 14.5 since last June, when Apple first announced their plans regarding the Apple's ATT or Apple's Tracking Transparency Framework. And since then, there have been numerous changes and improvements and adaptations that I'm sure many of you in the market as marketers, media partners, DSPs, etc., have made to prepare for the changes that we were expecting and are currently facing today. Following suit, as many of you guys probably know, Google has also recently announced their upcoming plans to remove IDFA for users who decide to opt out of internet-based advertising, expected late 2021. And so this user privacy and all of the changes that come along with that, especially in the ad tech industry, will continue to be an ongoing and hot topic moving forward as well. So today I'm going to start by sharing different data points to show the impact that iOS 14.5 has actually had on the market itself. Upon numerous meetings with advertisers and clients, we've realized that though advertisers can clearly see how iOS 14.5 and SKAd network has impacted their individual campaign performances or have impacted them directly, they have little visibility on the actual market trends that are going on that can actually be pretty insightful when strategizing and planning your performance marketing campaigns. So to start, we're going to start by looking into the current adoption rate by iOS operating system or OS version. This data is based on the data that we get at the bid request level and is a representation of kind of the breakdown of the market share by OS version. When iOS 14.5 was first released back in April, the end of April, we noticed there was a slower adoption rate of users updating to the new version. However, with the recent release of iOS 14.6 that occurred at the end of last month, we are seeing a quicker adoption rate with, as of yesterday, 70% of our total iOS bid requests coming from users with iOS 14.6. Now, this means that iOS 14.5 and 6 users make up about almost 3/4 of the current iOS market. And though this is a very high percentage, we still have a considerable amount of iOS users that have still yet to update to the newer versions. 27% of users are still on iOS 14.4 or lower versions. And while keeping this in mind, I want to also kind of quickly explain the changes that iOS 14.5 actually introduced to the market itself. Now, when you look at this graph here, previously we had our iOS 14.4 or less, or just our existing users on the user side. And on the inventory side, we have now SKAd network compatible and SKAd network incompatible inventories. Based on the compatibility of the inventory, this determined the attribution type or the attribution source of the users. The conversions were either attributable through MMPs, and in the case that it was not compatible with SKAd network, or both through MMPs and SKAd network in the case that the inventory was SKAd network attributable or compatible. Now, with the release of iOS 14.5, we have two new traffic types that were kind of added into the market. The concept itself is the same, meaning that now the OS version is just now iOS 14.5 and higher, and the inventory type is still broken down by SKAd network compatible or incompatible inventory. However, the attribution types for these new traffic sources is now dependent on the MMP settings of each individual advertiser. So what that means is if probabilistic attribution is enabled at the MMP level, then you will see the attribution for both the traffic groups through the MMPs. And in the case that probabilistic is disabled, iOS 14.5 traffic that is scan incompatible, highlighted in green, will not be traceable, whereas the scan compatible traffic for the iOS 14.5 plus users can be seen through SKAd network only. As you saw in the previous slide, we are kind of in a transition period where we see a mix of the different iOS versions in the market, meaning that we have different traffic groups, these four listed here, until we get to a 100% full market adoption. So what changes did iOS 14.5 exactly bring into the market? With iOS 14.6 already taking over 70% of the iOS market share, we are seeing a continued increase of SKAd network compatible bid requests for iOS users. When iOS 14.5 was first released back in April, as you can see here, we were seeing about a 60% of scan supported inventories, which has increased to 75% by the time that iOS 14.6 was released last month. And currently, or as of yesterday, we are seeing 78% of scan compatible bid requests for the iOS users. Now, this is a good sign as the percentage of iOS 14.5 plus users continue to grow. The amount of publishers that are compatible with scan is also increasing. Now, with that said, as expected, as iOS 14.6 has started to take over the majority of the iOS market share, we are also seeing a decline of iOS bid requests that actually contain IDFA information. As iOS 14.6 and LAT traffic continues to increase, the percentage of iOS bid requests containing IDFA information has actually dropped to about 35%. So taking into consideration all of these changes, how do these changes actually impact performance marketers on your day-to-day basis? So in this slide, I have broken down the kind of average CPMs by the four traffic sources that I've previously mentioned. The first traffic group highlighted in purple up here is the first traffic group represents the iOS 14.4 or less users whose conversions are still attributable through MMPs. Simply put, this is kind of what our existing traffic used to be before iOS 14.5 was kind of introduced into the market. As you saw in the previous slide, iOS bid requests containing IDFA information has decreased to 35%, which also means that the amount of users in this group is actually getting smaller. The CPM is about almost 2 times as high as the other traffic groups listed below. The other CPMs of the 3 traffic groups are roughly in the same range, averaging about $1.60. And one interesting point that I also want to point out here is kind of talking about the iOS 14.5 scan incompatible traffic that is highlighted in this yellowish green color. And this is interesting because you will only be able to track the conversions of these users through your MMPs if probabilistic attribution is enabled. However, in the case that it is not enabled, these conversions will be hard to trace, and it'll be hard to trace the users beyond the click, which can be kind of intimidating to some performance marketers. However, if you kind of look at the data shown here, the CPM of this traffic type is actually fairly low. And though I don't have it in the presentation today, when you look at the CTRs or click-through rates of these, they're also double the scan compatible traffic groups. And kind of going back, I want to talk about what are some potential causes in the gap of the CPMs between the first traffic source and the rest? Now, I think this is very dependent on how advertisers are approaching their marketing strategies. Speaking from personal experience and the numerous meetings that I've had with marketers, I've encountered many bigger or larger advertisers who are very conservative and having difficulty kind of letting go of what they were used to. They're still very focused on buying into this MMP attributable traffic, or have separate budgets in order to get the full visibility of performance that they are used to. However, as advertisers continue to pour budgets into this traffic group and the overall cost will continue to increase as it causes an oversaturation and competition for a group of users that are continuously decreasing in size. One kind of final point that I want to show is a breakdown of the bid requests by the actual traffic source. As you've seen in the previous slides, the market changes in OS adoption rate, the growing scan-compatible bid requests, the changes in CPM trends, and now the bid request by traffic source. I think this really captures how the market is always changing, especially in this temporary transitional phase that we're in. You can see here, even in the last 2 weeks, there's definitely certain traffic groups that have been increasing and decreasing, and the fluctuation is actually can be even more noticeable when you look at the previous month or a little bit longer time frame of the data. Though iOS 14.5 has taken over 73% of the market, there's still 27% of users who have yet to adopt. And I think the most important thing here is, despite all of these changes that are going into the market, one important thing is to be able to continue to target everyone, despite whatever their OS version is, whether they are an LAT user or an IDFA user, whether they're coming from a scan compatible or non-scan compatible inventory source. You just never know where your high quality users are going to come from. And so you don't want to set any limitations by kind of picking and choosing your target audience, especially because the percentage of each traffic group is always changing. However, because these market changes are occurring on a daily basis, it makes it very, very difficult for marketers such as yourselves to kind of keep up with the changes. So what's kind of one way that we can keep up with the changes that are happening on a daily basis? How can we ensure that marketers are spending their budgets proportionally and appropriately based on the traffic size and the actual performance of each traffic group? Honestly, I can only think of one answer, and that kind of breaks it down to the core, which is machine learning and automatic optimization. Without it, you'll always be trying to catch up to the market trends, which will be impossible since they're continuously changing on a daily basis. I think the important thing to do here is to cast a wide net, target all the users that were previously mentioned in each group, and kind of let machine learning models and algorithms decide who the best potential users are for your campaigns, and let them bid proportionally and appropriately based on the traffic size and the different CPMs to essentially just meet your campaign goals. The machine learning models will allocate the budgets as each traffic source fluctuates by the percentage that we're getting on the bid request level, and spend and allocate your budgets based on the performance, as opposed to trying to adjust and manually change your campaign settings yourself. Next, I'm going to talk about how you should approach your campaign setup to get the best performances in a constantly changing market. So as I emphasized before, and I briefly mentioned, with all of the adaptations that are happening, marketers still want to have some level of control in this ongoing changes with iOS 14.5 and SCAD network. And in doing so, they want to create different campaigns with different budgets, KPIs, user targets, inventory types. For example, shown here on the left, let's say they want to create a campaign to target iOS 14.4 and less users with a separate budget, measuring, let's say, different KPIs such as ROAS. And for campaign B, they want to set up another campaign to target SCAD network inventory types with iOS 14.5 and plus users. And they want to be able to control the different budgets and have control over the performance by breaking it down as there are multiple traffic sources that are introduced into the market. However, this can cause a negative impact not only on your separate campaigns, but just on the impact your overall campaign performance due to the market changes. If you set it up this way, you will need to constantly adjust budgets based on the traffic size, based on the performance. As iOS 14.5 grows, you'll need to increase budgets on the daily and decrease it for the other traffic groups. And what happens is you kind of get caught up playing a game of catch up, and it's going to impact your overall results because you're limiting the size of each campaign and each traffic source individually. So what do we recommend? As opposed to setting up multiple campaigns, I think that marketers should still focus on one unified campaign, just as you did before iOS 14.5 and SCAD network. First, just strategize by setting up your conversion value schemas. You want to continue to determine what your campaign goals are, what KPIs you have, and what you want to optimize towards. On the campaign setup side, as I mentioned, you want to target everyone in a unified campaign, which combines all of your OS versions, all of your inventory types, which are SCAD network and non-SCAD network publishers, and all of the traffic types that were mentioned before. And then on the optimization side, you want to kind of let the machine learning models do the hard work for you with automated budget allocation, making sure that you are spending your budget appropriately based on the different traffic sources. And as we get more scan compatible bid requests, making sure we're bidding on the right inventories to best spend your budget appropriately while meeting your campaign KPIs. I think I understand, however, I understand that though targeting all users in a single campaign because of all the changes that are happening in the market is recommended, marketers may want to break down and measure the performance by each traffic type, each inventory, let's say, or attribution source by SCAD network or MMP attribution sources separately. Now, to me, this is something that can be resolved more on the reporting side to not hinder the campaign performance. So instead of creating multiple campaigns in order to get the reporting separately, I think that it's important to just have one campaign and have it broken down on the reporting side. So though SCAD network does provide some sort of limitations in the visibility of data that we can get from users, you want to continue to work with media partners that can offer full transparency to allow you to measure the breakdown in performance, such as the performance of your LAT users or your non-LAT users by your attribution source, MMP, and the conversion value breakdown on the SCAD network side. So all of this, though, can be handled, we think, through the reporting for you to have clear visibility and performance breakdown of each different traffic type and traffic source. And as corny as this sounds, I think that there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. You know, as these changes continue to occur, we need to adapt to offer marketers as much insight we can into the different market changes, the different market trends, as well as updating our optimization strategies and marketing strategies to let advertisers continue to optimize towards the campaign goals that are most important to them. I think that we all just need to make sure that we educate ourselves with these new changes to have better understanding of how to market in a post iOS 14.5 and SCAD network world. At Moloco, we do strive to provide marketers with as much insightful data as we can, and we have a adoption tracker that allows anybody to keep track of the market trends and insights, a few of which I've mentioned here today. And you can also visit our virtual booth, get to know us if you have any questions, if you're interested in getting to know more about us. And you can also visit us at our webpage. And next, we will be at Pocket Gamer Connects in London and Game Developers Conference for our next events. And feel free to email or contact us at any time for additional questions or information. All right. I think if there are any questions, I can kind of go over them at this time.
Okay, Angela, thank you. That was really great and a lot of good data shared. Just to kick off, can you go into a bit more detail just to reiterate why you think it's best not to have the separate campaigns and to run one campaign?
Yeah, so I can kind of go back in the slides as well, just to show a visual. Because the market is always changing, a lot of times advertisers, what they want to do is create separate campaigns for the different traffic sources. But because, as you can see here, even within a 2-week period, the amount of traffic is growing, has almost doubled in size from 36% to 62% for the iOS 14.6 and scan attributable side. And because when this is growing and you have a set budget for each campaign, you're limiting yourself to the campaign performance. So as the traffic source grows, you want to ensure that you're allocating more budget to that traffic source so that you're not overspending and you're not getting a negative campaign performance in a traffic source that is decreasing in size.
Got it, right. And with the reporting you showed where you post, you're then showing the results of the campaign by traffic type. Would you then, depending on that, would you, let's bring the slide back. So yeah, here, based on that, would you then start excluding certain types of traffic?
I think on the reporting side, it's not about including or excluding. It's more about breaking it down to the level that you want to see it. So if you want to see it for the iOS 14.4 and less scan compatible traffic, or iOS 14.4 and less scan compatible traffic, the 4 different traffic types, we can break it down so that you can see the performance by each traffic source. And in each source, it's limited to just that. So the overall campaign performance can be inclusive of all traffic types. But if you want to see a breakdown with the different traffic types or the attribution source, so just the MMP attribution source or the SKAN network attribution source, you're able to do that and kind of measure your performance that way by breaking it down on a more granular level.
Great. And what if there are pockets of this traffic that's really not working? You're saying keeping that running, but just be aware of it. And
I think in terms of not working, and so when I say to kind of cast a wide net, that doesn't mean we're going to be targeting everybody, right? But when the machine learning models, how they work is based on the probability of a good user probably that shows up and a good potential user, we can still bid on those users. And so if a certain traffic source is not working, you can kind of let the machine learning models automatically decrease the spending on a certain source that tends to be underperforming, but still be able to have the option to target or still bring in a few of the users that might be good, even in a traffic source that might be underperforming as a whole.
Right. And in terms of the machine learning, what is it hooking into when there's a lack of post-install events or data now that can latch onto? What's it kind of able to work on?
Mm-hmm. I think right now, as I kind of previously mentioned, we're in a very unique stage, or in a very unique transitional phase where we still are able to get, still, as I mentioned, 27% of the market is still on iOS 14.4 or less. So on that side, we still have all of the data that we were getting through the MMPs. And though there is limited visibility on the scan postbacks or SKAN network postbacks that we do get, we are able to kind of use the different postback data or post-install data conversion values that we get from the SKAN network side, as well as the MMP side, to continue to still target, especially in this kind of overlapping transitional period that we have right now.
Got it. And how do you How are you seeing clients and apps and different games adapt to this disruption?
Yeah, I think that the biggest difficulty that advertisers are facing is kind of being able to set up what their goals are. And so kind of going back to the most important thing is kind of strategizing and how to approach your marketing campaigns. So I think the biggest thing, depending on the vertical and depending on what your campaign goals are, a lot of times pre-iOS 14.5, many marketers, even today, are very focused on ROAS optimization and return on ad spend. And so I think that this limitation that advertisers are facing is more on how to set up their conversion value schemas, how to make sure and use that mapping and conversion value schemas to be able to still optimize towards their initial goals.
And are you seeing, speaking of verticals, are you seeing any particular app or game verticals adapting better or quicker to this?
I think it's not just about the vertical, but it's also their approach. A lot of advertisers, even though that they're very, ROAS driven with SKAd Network, they've kind of tested more in-app event optimizations as opposed to, an actual revenue value. So it really just depends, I think, on the goal and the setup and their approach than the different trends in the actual just verticals, because it really depends on your campaign goals and how you kind of set that up.
Right. And where you talked about transitional period, where do you see this ending up? Where do you think we'll be in a year or two, or what's the end game? You mentioned the light at the end of the tunnel. What sort of place do you think we're going to get to, and how long is it going to take?
Sure. I mean, it's been about, let's say, I think it's been about not even about 1 month now since iOS 14.6 was released, and we're already at 70% of, market share for iOS 14.6 users. So I would say, I'm not sure in terms of the timeline, but probably in the next month or two, I think that I can see, 80 plus or 90 plus, almost 100% full market adoption rate for iOS 14.5 plus users. And so advertisers will definitely need to start testing their conversion value schemas now, making sure how to set up those, and based on that data and optimizing towards the SKAd network postbacks and optimizing towards conversion values as we move to a full 100% iOS 14.5 plus world.
Great. Okay. Well, that's all to come in the future, and I think that's it for now. So thank you so much, Angela, for providing such great data and making it seem a little bit clearer. And it's very tough to do that. So I want to say a big thank you to you for that, and loved all the data. Now I think we've dropped in the chat that you can get hold of some of this over at the Moloco Ads mobile adoption tracker. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Has some of this, yeah. So great. Well, thanks so much for being our final session of today, and look forward to hearing an update soon.
All right, thank you for having me.